Billings here with you tonight, Friday night, and wow, everything that has been going on in this country since the election. 27 days or so? Forgive my math if I'm not spot on with that, but for 27 or so days, the sun shined brighter in America, even on cloudy days, ladies and gentlemen. Coming to you from smack dab in the middle of the fruited plain. Please make sure that you subscribe, that you like, that you share the show and the program tonight. Christian nationality, Christian nationalism, Christianity in general on the rise throughout America, especially within the new Trump administration. It's amazing, right? The legacy media not talking much about this, but it's going on. Have you watched and listened to J.D. Vance over the last couple of days? Have you watched and listened to Elon Musk over the last couple of days? Christian nationality, Christian values. All of that and much more. Today, ladies and gentlemen, the right side with Doug Billings is now upon you. Are you ready?
Hey everybody, my
Let's
name
go.
is General Mike Flynn, and I'm here to do a big shout out for my great friend and one of the best in the business, Mr. Doug Billings. Right side with Doug Billings, right side with Doug Billings. Doug is the future of the airwaves when it comes to independent broadcasters and podcasters. He is the new Rush Limbaugh. He's exactly what America needs right now, looking for honesty, looking for wisdom, looking for truth, looking for patriotism. Listen to Doug Billings at Right Side with Doug Billings. God bless you and God bless America, and thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are winning. We're winning. Welcome to the Right Side with Doug Billings. Are you ready?
We are not liberal snowflakes who melt away in the face of tragedy, adversity, and challenge. We are a covenant nation under God, and His divine providence is not dead and it's not gone. It is living within each and every one of you. And you will bring it to life in such a way that the world has never seen before. We never back down. We never give up. We march forward.
And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. What a day, what a week, what a month, what a blessing that it's been to have President Trump in the mix, back where he belongs in the White House. It's amazing. And I know that you all feel the same way. Before I really get into the nuts and bolts here today, don't forget 321 mattress. 321 mattress. If you want the best sleep, the best pillow sheets and so forth, I know. Y'all don't believe me, but hang on a minute. Check it out. These people are friends. They're good, decent people. Everything, 25% of every sale they make goes to Special Olympics. And if you remember my story about my son Michael, he's got Down syndrome. I call it the divine chromosome. The Down syndrome kids have an extra 21st chromosome. I call it the divine chromosome. And so I like to support 321 mattress. And if you go to 321mat, MATT.com/Doug. You can help me out. You can help my son Michael out in the show, and you can benefit from some of the best sleeping products on the market today. 321.mat, MAT.com/Doug. Head on over there and support a great cause that donates 25% of every sale to the Special Olympics, and feel good about that. Christian nationalism, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. Can I say those words without the fear of being canceled anymore? Thank you, Elon Musk, for rescuing this platform, especially for free speech and for the ability to tell the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we're hearing and seeing a lot of evidence in our government these days that there is this great reawakening happening. I've talked to you since I started the show 5 years ago. In fact, we just had our anniversary. 5 years ago, February 2021, I started this program and came to you because I couldn't tell the truth at work and was let go because as the VP of HR, I was not going to write policies that would sequester people away and prevent preventative care from taking place for patients. And so I started this program and I began to speak with you good people, and we've all been in this thing together since the beginning. But this reawakening that I have spoken about for these past 5 years is manyfold, and there's many facets to this reawakening. Part of it is that we, the people, are waking up to the truth about what our government has become over the past several decades. And another part of it is that the divine providence of God and the intent of the founding fathers are items that Americans are being awakened to again as well. you might expect that when liberals hear people like me talk about this, they have absolute conniption fits. They have meltdowns. Ben, I see you out there, by the way. Thank you for the text. I responded. I hope you got it. Good to see you, Ben Axley, out there on YouTube. I appreciate you very much. Remember, for liberals, nothing can come in between them and the state. Nothing can come between you and the state, according to liberals. In fact, most importantly, according to the liberal playbook, in fact, if you look up the liberal playbook, chapter 3, page 27, subsection 2b, you'll see it written specifically that God must be eliminated. God must not be allowed to come between us, the people, and the state, the party and the state. Voodoo Queen, how are you? Listening to the X Spaces. I'm a member of Missouri Freedom. Hey, thank you for being here. I'm glad that you caught me on X Spaces. I'm over there quite a bit. Appreciate it, Voodoo Queen. Appreciate you very much. Most importantly, according to liberals, we must remember, and I want this to sink in because I think evidence of the obvious is sufficient. You all probably already know this, but they have excommunicated God from their platform. There's no secret about that. We look at President Trump and what he represents. I mean, for gosh sakes, President Trump has more Catholics in his cabinet and his administration than any president in the history of this republic. More Christian people, more evangelicals surround President Trump. More Catholics, more Christians just in general are surrounding our president than any before. And the key among them, in that group at least, is J.D. Vance. Vice President Vance, the other day in an interview, I mean, this was a great, he talked about a topic that I learned back in my days when I was in the seminary and I was studying to be a Catholic priest way long ago in the late 80s. Yes, that was part of my history, and I'm happy for it. Had a great experience. But he talked about something that I learned back in the days when I was studying to be a priest. So I'm going to throw a little bit of Latin lingo at you, ladies and gentlemen. J.D. Vance spoke about something called ordo amoris, which means the right ordering of things. And in theological terms, it means the right ordering and care of human beings, the care that human beings offer themselves, their families, their communities, and their world. Okay. And when you look at that in a deeper study, it's an ancient Christian and theological philosophy that states we as human beings are to establish a relationship with God. First and foremost, a relationship with God. Then, I mean, and that's, I think, I shouldn't just brush over that, but I mean, we in the new media, and I'm not afraid to talk about it, you'll never hear this in the legacy media, but an individual relationship with our Creator. That's what we are called to do. That's the meaning and essence of life on this planet. Then, after we've established that individual relationship with the Creator, we establish a godly relationship with our family, our immediate family, husband and wife and children. And by the way, thank you, President Trump, for signing an executive order that declares there are only two genders, as if we needed to know that. But it's true, and I'm glad that he did it. God and family, okay? Godly relationship with ourselves and with our Creator and with our family. Then Ordo Amoris calls for us to establish that godly relationship with our neighbors, the neighbors that live across the street or down the street, in our city, in our county, within the state in which we live, okay? God, family, neighbors. Then God calls us, according to Ordo Amoris, to establish relationships with our national community, our country, the people within the United States, in our case. Then we establish that godly relationship with our world community. And that is the order of what Vice President Vance was talking about when he mentioned the theological term ordo amoris, the right order of things. You, me, and God, right? God first, family, immediate neighborhood and community, and then a national community. So what the radical left has done, especially in terms of illegal immigration, is trying to convince us that we should forget the straight and the right and proper order of things, and that we should forget that the action of illegal immigration represents lawlessness, for example, but that we should put these illegals ahead of our own people, of our own communities, of our own families. You see, when you boil it down this way, when you take the time to look into it, the radical liberal, anti-God, anti-American movement is discovered, and we can see it. I've been saying this for 5 years. Look, first of all, the Democrat Party does not exist. I have said that 100 times. If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times over the last 5 years. They have become the Communist Socialist Party, blending communism and socialism together. They are clearly an anti-American political party. Just look at what they've done. From the border to defunding the police to all of it, every policy brings about chaos, crisis, and crime. And all of that is done on purpose. It is not accidental. It's not collateral damage. It is actually thought about and put forward first and foremost on purpose to bring about crime, chaos, and crisis. Why? Because they think when those elements exist in our society that we are more apt to believe that we do need big government to save us. Elon Musk the other day on a Tucker Carlson interview identified himself as a cultural Christian. President Trump himself is vocal about his newfound passion for faith and God. And yes, I think, certainly I'm not the first one to say it or notice it, but I do think the assassination attempts had a profound effect on our president, and rightly so, probably nudged him further along in his faith within his own life. And I think that his cabinet reflects this newfound faith that he wants to not only talk about and exude personally, but then have around him in his administration. It is filled, as I said, with more Christian people of deep faith than any president before in our history. Interestingly, there is a group out there, and if you haven't heard of them, look them up. It's called the Public Religion Research Institute, the Public Religion Research Institute, PRPI. And they took a look last week and did a poll that reveals 30% of Americans identify as Christian nationalists. In case you're from Raytown, Missouri, by the way, that's 1/3 of America's population. They identify as Christian nationalists. That's absolutely I was astounded that the number was that high. I had certainly believed that Christian nationalism was on the rise and that we're hearing bits and pieces of it more and more. People are talking in those terms that America's a Christian nation. More people are believing what I've been saying over the past 5 years, that God inspired the founding of this country. Our founding documents are inspired by God and written by men. Certainly our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, and to a great degree, the Bill of Rights. But it begs the question, all of this, well, Christian nationalism and so forth. How do you tell? Is there a formula for a Christian nationalist? Is there some sort of an earmark? What do they have, a platform? As it turns out, they do. So what is a Christian nationalist? What is Christian nationalism? So here the group, PRPI, identified it, and I'm going to tell you, it is because that you want most members. I think that if I were to say, for example, most people in this country, irregardless of their religious denomination or even whether or not they have a religious denomination, most people in this country believe in God. Most people pray in some form or fashion. Okay. Most people believe in a life after death. Okay. But when you're at your next cocktail party and there's a liberal in the room and the topic of national Christian socialism or nationalism, I should say, not socialism, but Christian nationalism appears in the conversation, I want you to be able to contain what the liberals will ultimately try to convince you of, that it's a fascist socialist movement, that it's rooted in Nazism, and so whatever they may say, or that God doesn't exist at all. I want you to be armed with the truth. Christian nationalism, as it turns out, has 5 key pillars, and I'm just going to tell you what they are. The 5 pillars of Christian nationalism, and who among us would ever begin or be able to argue with these things? When we look at America and the founding fathers and their intent for this nation, I would put it to you, the only people who could argue with these 5 pillars are either chronically intellectually immature or blindly partisan against the conservative movement in America. So the 5 pillars of Christian nationalism are: number 1, that the United States government should declare America a Christian nation. Number 2, U.S. laws should be based on Christian values. Number 3, if the U.S. moves away from our Christian foundations, we will not have a country any longer. Number 4, being Christian is an important part of being a true American. And number 5, God has called Christians to exercise dominion over all areas of American society. Those are the 5 pillars of Christian nationalism. Now, radical liberals follow this program and they troll it, and their heads are exploding at this very moment. And as soon as they recover and they get back to their keyboards in their mother's basements and clean up the soiled underwear that they're wearing, they're going to attack those 5 pillars and say that it's absolutely not the intent of the founders or anything that has to do with America. It is not difficult to see that the radical liberal hierarchy and secular liberals throughout this republic will convulse and will go into seizures upon reading or hearing these 5 pillars of Christian nationalism. And it's precisely what you and I, as MAGA conservatives, believe, that God inspired the founding fathers to draft our founding documents. As I said, clearly our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence, and to a large degree, the Bill of Rights. That's why we're seeing a rise in state governments within America initiating religious initiatives into their legislative process. Texas, Louisiana is a couple of the examples where the 10 Commandments are making a comeback in the classroom. And the Pledge of Allegiance being brought back. If you don't live in an area where the Pledge of Allegiance has been omitted from the daily routine, usually in the mornings of every American school, it's coming back. And it's coming back on purpose and with a vengeance. It's because of American Christian nationalism. The founding fathers attended things like the 10 Commandments, the Bible, theology, Latin, civics, English, arithmetic, all of those things, geography, to be studied in public classrooms. All it takes is a cursory look in research and just Google or research in any way early American school curriculums, the curriculums espoused by the founding fathers. All of them, even the most liberal of them, wanted those elements to be included in public schools. And we're slowly working our way back because the radical liberal movement has, over the last 127 years or so, weeded all of that out of the American society. And we conservatives are just waking up to this. 2020 was our big wake up, right? The theft of an American presidential election. We woke up the next day. What happened? Where'd Trump go? He was leading when I went to sleep. And now we're awake, and now all of a sudden we're learning and we're becoming activists like the radical left counterparts of ours had become many, many years, decades ago. So we have done great things as American conservatives, but we've got to be honest. We were asleep at the wheel for a long time, and we did not become locally involved in our counties and our political life at home, and therefore and thereby the radical left liberals who became those activists stole the country. They stole God's divine providence, and they shut out the intent of the founding fathers. Now, there's also a survey out there by this group that says 40% of Americans believe, 40% of Americans believe that God ordained President Trump to the presidency. That's 1 in 4 people in America, my friends. This is significant because in almost every state in the union where people identify as being aligned with those 5 pillars of Christian nationalism, there are several states that the majority of population do. Oklahoma, Mississippi, Texas to a degree. You've got North Dakota heavily favoring the Christian nationalists and identify with that. And then in almost every other state, with the exception of course, the blue states that you would recognize, Illinois, California, Washington, and Oregon, just to name a few, most everyone else believes that God has ordained Trump to be president. That's an astounding statistic, and it's an astounding poll. 40% of Americans and 15,000 people were polled. That's a significant number. So I find that all very good news. I think it's incredible. You know, the theft of an American presidential election that was thrust upon us in 2020, many of us were quite frankly panicked about losing our country. And I don't blame people for being panicked about that. But again, for those of you who have watched the show and those of you who are just coming on board, I've told you America was never going to go away. America was in a nightmare, most definitely during the Biden, especially during the Biden years and during that theft of the American presidential election, we were in a nightmare. But what did I tell you? Everybody wakes up from nightmares. So now that we're awake, we have lots of work to do. We understand that we've got to get continued work in our local communities, our local counties, and the states in which we live to get MAGA conservative people elected, because we don't affect change in Washington, D.C. in Washington, D.C. In other words, change never begins there. We begin change in our local areas, our local homes, our counties. But we thought that we might lose our country. But when we use the gift of hindsight and we look back on those years, I would put it to you that what we see is the hand of God actively involved in all of it in 2020 and even in the theft of the presidential election. Let me just go through a few points with you about that, because I think this is important for all of us to look back in time and realize that the divine providence of God prevented President Trump from taking office in 2020. What? Why would God do that, Doug? Are you crazy? Why would God take President Trump out? I thought you just said that God ordained Trump to be president. He did for 2024. But he took Trump out in 2020 for a very good reason. God sat Trump on the sidelines. And if you think about it, I think it makes perfect sense. If Trump had entered into the White House in 2020, he would have been impeached for the third time. The radical liberal hierarchy had both houses. And if he was impeached for that third time, he could not have run for dog catcher anywhere. God was protecting President Trump for 2024. And also, point number 2, the great reawakening began among you and I. Prior to 2020, I was asleep. I didn't know to the depth and the width of the great, the deep state and its great power to sway our bureaucracy away from the divine providence of God and the intent of the founders. I didn't know, but I, like you, like many of you, was awakened. Multiple dozens upon millions of people began to awaken to the corruption, to the reality of the deep state, the swamp that had swallowed up our government and created the mess that we're in. That was point number 2, and it's part of what God's divine providence allowed us to experience. Point number 3, the evil of liberalism became more and more exposed. Every policy put forth by the liberal hierarchy, every one of it, brought back about chaos, crisis, and crime. Their open border policy is probably the most profound example of that, but certainly also they're defunding the police policies. The fact that their radical liberal hierarchy, district attorneys and states attorneys generals did not prosecute with profound prejudice violent criminals and let them go early, or sometimes didn't sentence them at all so that they could get back out on the streets, all of that brought forth suffering, chaos, crime, crisis. It was evident. I mean, when Hurricane Helene hit, the slow response to get federal government under the liberal hierarchy regime to Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, it was done on purpose. Because they don't want, the radical liberal government believes that when chaos, crisis, and crime hits, that we as Americans are more likely to believe that we need to depend on the federal government instead of our neighbors. Remember those days? Remember Helene in North Carolina, especially? They wouldn't let truckers get in with supplies. They wouldn't let rescue workers and relief people come in with water and so forth and so on. Accidental? I think not. The liberal policies in blue states and other places where they don't prosecute crime with extreme prejudice, they let these natural disasters take their course without letting FEMA and other people do their job. Are you kidding me? We saw it play out in real time. In fact, many times, criminals, for example, Even if they are sentenced, they're given very light sentences or let out earlier. And when common, everyday people throughout the Republic began to see these things during this great reawakening, they rebelled against liberalism. They rebelled against godliness. And what we are witnessing today is the paradox that liberalism has become the death of liberalism. And also, since the inauguration of Donald Trump for the second time, what we're witnessing is the sweeping in of the divine providence of God back into this country to represent and restore what the founding fathers intended us to be. The divine providence of God is seeing to it that the bureaucracy, the fraud, the theft, the tyranny within the government of our republic is being exposed and eliminated. Now, the cynics out there will say, oh, no, it's just, it's Elon Musk and Doge doing their job. Well, yes, but it's the divine providence of God working through them to get that job done, working through J.D. Vance and our president, Donald Trump, to usher in this agenda. This agenda, by the way, Doge, just as an example, 80% of Americans agree with what Doge is doing, and 20% doesn't. It's the 80-20 rule. You've got the radical liberal hierarchy identifying itself with the 20% kook fringe. Meanwhile, John and Jane Doe on the streets of America, who may well have voted for Administrator Biden and Vice Pretender Harris, are clearly on board with what Trump is doing because they know and they've realized and they've become awakened to the fact that the radical liberal Democrat Communist Socialist Party is not what they have in mind for this country, and it is not what they expect. The divine providence of God is doing this to move us back to the intent of the founding fathers. We have very rarely in the history of this republic seen miracles so blatantly obvious. The divine providence of God is using President Trump and those who he has selected. Elon Musk, Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, Kash Patel, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Pete Hegseth, Pam Bondi, all of them, okay? I can't list every one of them, but all of them in that administration. It's important for us to take a step back and look at this because what we are witnessing, my friends, is the divine providence of God himself at work and in action within our republic. That's why the majority of Americans have been in such a great mood these last 27 or so days, because it feels good to be surrounded by the divine providence of God. That's what's intended. God intended this to be enjoyable in America and to have dreams and aspire to do better and become the best version of ourselves. And this is exactly what President Trump embodies. This is exactly why people around the world are migrating to their own version of MAGA in whatever country they're in. We want the same thing that they're doing in America. It's God. And it's a godly thing to be witnessing. Reflect on that this week and think about how you've seen God in your own life. Ordos Amarani, the correct order of things, ladies and gentlemen. God, family, neighbor, country, world. That's how it should be. That's what the MAGA movement represents and why America First makes biblical, theological, and Christian sense. And it's why Christian nationalism is on the rise in America and around this planet. Make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen. Give yourself permission to believe that. Please remember also, by the way, if you like this program, if you like me, head over to DougBillings.us. DougBillings.us, that's my website. Consider, why don't you making a monthly $5, $10, whatever donation over there so that I can continue to bring you this show. DougBillings.us. There's a donate tab over there. Please consider offering a monthly recurring donation. That's how I bring you the show. I never charge you for this show. You always get to see it for free. But I would appreciate that support. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in this thing together. I'm glad to be with you. Believe it. For the Republic. Cheers.